All it took for WWE to sit atop the wealth mountain right now were a series of conversations that helped reshape the industry forever. That's also true for various other major figures, promotions, and wrestlers inside the wrestling sphere. Things could honestly be so very different. So with that in mind, I'm Gareth from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 secret conversations that changed wrestling history forever. Number 10, Cody and the Bucks discuss Dave Meltzer's words. Wrestling Observer Chief Dave Meltzer couldn't have known the flames he was fanning when he said that ROH would never shift 10,000 tickets for one of their shows. That, according to Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, got the friends who all worked for the company talking. That led to the birth of AEW. The threesome produced their own all-in event on the 1st of September 2018, first of course, and the success of that made Meltzer eat his words. No, Ring of Honor hadn't shifted 10,000 briefs, but some of the group's top talents had, and that must have felt great. After that, Cody and the Bucks pondered more. That's when Tony Khan and family came into the picture. Who knows if All Elite would even be a thing had Meltzer not fired out an accidental challenge to guys who were hungry to prove him wrong. There is a chance that Cody, the Bucks, or a combo of indie workers might have tried running their own company, but shooting the stuff about Dave's comments here ultimately led to bigger things. Number 9, we're starting on top of the cell. Bruce Pritchard was appalled when he heard from Mick Foley that he and The Undertaker planned to start their Hell in a Cell stunt show on top of the cage. That was breaking new ground for the match type, and Pritchard wondered if it had ruined the entire point of having a roof structure in the first place. Foley didn't care though. He had something huge in mind. That passive conversation with one of the WWF's top creative minds changed the course of Hell in a Cell history for good. After Mick's huge bumps off and through the cage, the latter of which was something he hadn't planned, fans expected massive stunts whenever the gimmick was scheduled. When was the last truly great Cell match though? It is an interesting question, to be honest, because most today can't hope to live up to or top what Taker and Mankind achieved at King of the Ring 1998. That may not be the case had they not agreed to start on top. And while I've got you here, what's your favourite Hell in a Cell bout outside of this particular classic? Let me know in the comments section down below. Number 8, Bret Hart talks to WCW in 1992. Bret Hart bagged his first WWF World title from Ric Flair on the 12th of October 1992. Before that, he was secretly negotiating with WCW about jumping over to work there, but couldn't come to an agreement on money with then senior management Jim Barnett. Barnett actually told the Hitman to stay put over the phone. Although Hart was the reigning Intercontinental Champion at the time these talks took place, he wasn't sure how seriously Vince McMahon would take him as a headliner. In fact, Bret wasn't even sure Vince viewed him as someone deserving of a push at all. He was willing to take more money in WCW and try his luck there. Barnett stepped in to dismiss what others in WCW were telling the Canadian. They couldn't actually pay him the cash he was looking for, and that eventually changed Hart's mind. He decided to stay in the WWF. Vince then told him he'd be champ later that year, and they all lived happily ever after. Wait. Number 7, The Undertaker tells Vince McMahon he's done. On WWE's Last Ride documentary series, The Undertaker was shown chatting with Vince McMahon after his tag team match at Extreme Rules 2019. Despite being pleased with how the bout had gone, Taker suddenly told his gaffer that he was done and would probably be hanging up the tights. McMahon told him, "I will follow your lead." Extreme Rules didn't end up being The Undertaker's final match, of course, but it was a sign that the icon was mentally prepared to call it a career almost 30 years deep. He'd wrestle one more time in a cinematic boneyard brawl against AJ Styles at WrestleMania 36, before announcing on the Doc's finale that he was retiring. As the Usos and the Revival worked a tag match out in the ring, Taker told Vince behind the curtain at Gorilla that he was likely moving on from this chapter of his life, and nobody knew that conversation had even taken place at the time, aside from them and the camera crew. Number 6, Ted Turner gives Eric Bischoff Monday nights. In mid-1995, Eric Bischoff strolled nervously into Ted Turner's office and braced himself for a verbal volley of vitriol. A triple V, if you will. He planned to pitch that WCW programming strike up a deal with China's Star Network. The problem? That network was owned and operated by sworn Turner enemy Rupert Murdoch. Bish didn't even get that far into the pitch though. After a few minutes of setting the scene, Ted interrupted him and boldly asked, "What do we need to do to compete with Vince McMahon?" Stunned by the question, Eric blurted out that he needed to go head to head with him. That's when Turner told his executives to give WCW WCW 2 primetime hours every Monday night. Boom! Nitro was born, and it did eventually debut that September. Bischoff didn't divulge details on this face-to-face with Ted until years later, but he recognizes how pivotal it was in changing the wrestling landscape forever. The Monday Night Wars had very much begun. Number 5, Eric Bischoff convinces Hulk Hogan to turn heel. 1995 was notable for another reason too. Towards the end of the year, Bischoff started talking to Hulk Hogan about the possibility of freshening up his act and trying something different. By 1996, polite talks had switched into full-blown pitches for Hogan to turn heel. Eric had the perfect gig for him. Hulk would be the leader of the new heel faction known as the New World Order. Whilst all this was going on behind the scenes, Hogan continued playing his classic babyface character in front of fans. Few knew what the real plan was, or that Hulk was pacing around his house wondering if going rogue might destroy everything he had built since the mid-80s. This was the hardest decision he had ever been asked to make. Bischoff got his way at the 11th hour when Hogan finally made up his mind and agreed to become the NWO's focal point. His heel turn shook the foundations of WCW as well as the entire wrestling industry, prolonged Hulk's career, and helped the company become number 1. Number 4, Jamie Kellner cancels WCW programming. It wasn't Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff, or even Ted Turner who made the biggest call in WCW's history though. It was a television executive nobody had even heard of. Jamie Kellner was the one who decided that company programming would no longer air on Turner's own networks in 2001. Without TV, the company was effectively defunct. Kellner's move opened the door for Vince McMahon to purchase the remnants of a promotion that had once kicked his ass all over the United States. For the paltry sum of $2.5 million, McMahon received WCW's tape library, numerous trademarks, and over 20 talent contracts he could use to bolster the ranks on his own shows. A random board meeting amongst Turner top brass altered the course of wrestling history for good. WCW didn't mean much to Kellner or his associates, it arguably never did to be honest, and they were sick and tired of the money pit it had become, so they put a pen through it and moved on. Number 3, Howard Finkel names WrestleMania. The brand name WrestleMania has become synonymous with pomp, circumstance, and endless explosion of fireworks and excitement. It's by far the biggest show on WWE's calendar every single year. It is hard to see it still being around as a respected thriller. Had original plans to call the show the Colossal Tussle prevailed though. That, believe it or not, was the first name proposed for Mania, and it didn't change until someone said something to the effect of, that sucks, how about calling it WrestleMania instead? That someone was Howard Finkel. Bruce Pritchard once revealed on his podcast that the Fink was the one who named WWE's iconic annual masterpiece. Without his intervention and willingness to speak up one day, Vince McMahon might have went with the Colossal Tussle, and yours truly probably wouldn't be talking about wrestling right this very second. Number 2, the plan to screw Bret Hart. This one wouldn't have happened had Bret bolted to WCW back in 1992, of course. He didn't though, and instead went on to become a linchpin of the WWF's main event mix. Hart's influence would grow to the extent that he was one of Vince McMahon's most trusted lieutenants. Then Vince reneged on a bumper new deal with Bret, said he couldn't afford it, and that pissed Hart off to the point that he decided WCW's money should be his instead. At that point, things turned a bit ugly. Bret, who had a fractured relationship with Shawn Michaels, told Vince he would not drop the WWF title to him in Canada. That worried McMahon because it meant Hart could theoretically appear on WCW TV with his top title. He could not let that happen, so he called a meeting. Vince, Michaels, Triple H, and possibly a few others conspired to screw Hart out of the belt at Survivor Series 1997. Yes, the screw job has been chronicled endlessly, but it still deserves a spot on this list. The secret conversations Vince had with HBK and others pushed Hart out, birthed the Mr. McMahon character, and had an absolutely huge knock-on effect generally. And number 1, Vince McMahon Sr. sells to his son. Vince McMahon Jr., and he reportedly hates the junior tag, but it's a bit necessary here, founded Titan Sports in 1980. 2 years later, he acquired the World Wrestling Federation from his father and set about ruthlessly expanding throughout the US, and eventually globally over the next decade. Vince Sr. could not have known during those conversations about Vince Jr. assuming control of the entire company that his boy would ignore traditions, break new ground, and revolutionize the pro wrestling industry. Hell, there's a chance Sr. might not have given Jr. complete power had he known the extent of his plans. Vince the younger wanted to monopolize, and he did not care who he had to trample over to get there. That was just the way it was. He smelled opportunity and he was going to grasp it regardless of what anyone said. Who honestly knows how different things would be had Sr. actually said, "No chance in hell, son," and decided to sell up to someone outside side of the family. A McMahonless wrestling business. Imagine that. And that is our list. Know of any other secret conversations that changed wrestling history forever? Well, let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and don't forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're down there. Also, if you're into this sort of stuff, then please head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic wrestling articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Wrestling. Cheers for stopping by today, and hopefully we'll see you again rather soon. Bye bye!